Sukesh Gara. I am leading the effort to put together the Massachusetts roadmap for the advanced nuclear and fusion energy. I'm a nuclear engineer by training, relocated to Massachusetts or located to Massachusetts about 13 years ago from the state of Texas. Nuclear engineer by training, and my first degree was in environmental engineering. So, really, what I want to talk about today is the process that we started about a month and a half, close to 2 months ago, when the governor announced this interest of developing a roadmap as to how we may look at the possibility of nuclear energy and what ways in which we could participate, whether it's building the nuclear power plant, supply chain, workforce, and all of the above. So, my background's in nuclear engineering, but a lot of the work that I've been doing recently is understanding how energy portfolios work, and how nuclear energy can fit into a very diversified distribution system, especially with significant renewable and storage. So I just want to kind of walk through what we're trying to accomplish with the roadmap. And the first, I want to define the stakeholders. So part of the reason we're hosting these webinars is to really get that information out there, that we want everybody's involvement from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and actually including our neighboring states. As evidenced, I am in Connecticut today speaking to over 150 people, again, with the interest of what is going on in the region. So it's not only important to the state of Massachusetts, but I think given the New England states, it's also important to our neighboring coordination. And I want to also present the schedule as to where we're going, and then the goals and objectives of the roadmap, and then the motivation behind it. So, who are you a stakeholder? If you're at this meeting, you are absolutely a stakeholder. In fact, I have two young boys, and I tell them that they are stakeholders. If you pay taxes to the state of Massachusetts, if you live in the state of Massachusetts, or if you are in New England region consuming energy, then you are a stakeholder. But of course, the stakeholders can be of various different groupings. So it could be organizations, it could be communities, individuals that are actually part of other groups. And we really want to be able to kind of get the full comprehensive involvement. And we are super excited that there has been hundreds of people who have joined these webinars. Thank you again for taking the time to be on one of these. Please talk to your colleagues, your neighbors. This is the beginning of the information session and the early engagement on the conversations around nuclear. There is so much information out there. There has been some stale information out there for not having a nuclear position in the state of Massachusetts for over 30 years, that it's important that we at least start talking about it. So we want to engage the folks who benefit, the folks who build, the folks who may be potentially looking at protecting and safely operating these reactors and looking at long-term careers in the energy sector and the nuclear more broadly. So we want your partnership in getting the word out. These are the 9 stakeholder groups that we sort of lumped together based on the review of other processes across the US, and also looking at some of the other activities on roadmap development for renewable energy and other things that are done within the state of Massachusetts. We basically just gave some examples of companies or organizations, but that's not really the exhaustive list. It's just an example. And then we also kind of define the focus areas that each of the stakeholder groups are doing. The intention of defining these stakeholder groups is that we want the sort of free, transparent conversations among each of the stakeholder groups on the issues that relate to the roadmap. And so that's one way of holding stakeholder group meetings. There are other ways in which we are going to be doing these kinds of meetings into the future, where you may have a cross-cutting of different stakeholder groups. discussing a particular issue. So there's different ways of doing things. Right now, the schedule that we have essentially is on these stakeholder groups. We will raise the same questions. For some, there will be more inputs from certain stakeholder groups. For others, there'll be inputs but we want everybody to know that we're asking you the same questions and providing the same opportunity to provide input. So today's is the last of the webinars, and then all of the information is on the uml.edu nuclear roadmap. If you click on it, you can actually look at the stakeholder groups and also are able to participate by registering into one of those group meetings. Of course, these are all open meetings. We certainly welcome your participation. But if you kind of register for the ones that align with where your institutional knowledge or your personal interest and engagement is, that would be probably the most enriching for yourself and for the group that you come in. We've had a great deal of registration across the board in all stakeholder group meetings. So we're very encouraged to know that there is actually genuine expressed and demonstrated interest in what we are doing today from a wide range of audience. So thank you again for everybody who has gotten the word out there and being an engaged population. So what's the real mission of the roadmap? The roadmap is essentially to start the early engagement process across the stakeholder groups, to start to identify those stakeholder groups, whether it's across academia, industry, government, and communities, so that as we continue the dialogue, as we transition from developing a menu, so to speak, or a plan to then start to talk about how we will approach things, where we would be putting our priorities, how do we do down selection on technology, how do we socialize what is important in the technology to the technology developers for the New England region? Are there certain specific use cases that would make as a compelling opportunity for developers to look at New England region for nuclear perspective? So really this exercise of developing the roadmap, in my opinion and my view of what we've seen across and talked to people, is to get that conversation started, to be very intentional about it, and to genuinely capture the sentiments so that we do choose the right menu, even though the menu may have some of the same attributes of appetizers, main meal, desserts, and coffee, but we want to kind of prioritize where we want to put things in. So we again appreciate the involvement, and then the objective is ultimately to produce a document, and hopefully, and from all the input that we're getting, to maintain that continuous dialogue of this engaged population through formations of working groups, and then some kind of a task force that sort of mobilizes and functionalizes the goals and outcomes of the roadmap. So essentially, that's where we would love to be able to kind of get to. We're already getting a good amount of information from folks. And I should mention the feedback form that's on the web page allows you to provide individual comments. It also allows you to send attachments to documents that we should be considering, and those will all become part of our informed process of integrating into the development of the roadmap. So what's the structure of the roadmap? Essentially, we're doing a lot of review of where our strength is, what is the legacy of nuclear within the Massachusetts, and what our current capabilities are and where the gaps might be. And then we want to put those in context of the four pillars. And the four priority pillars are essentially workforce, the technology assessment and use cases for Massachusetts and the New England region, the community engagement. What are some of the tools and models that have been used both within the New England region and nationally, some of the best practices? We want to identify those and write them up into the roadmap so that we can then functionalize those for systematic long-term community engagement through our community leaders, through our local population, and our institutions of higher education and others that become a resource, whether it's the experts or community leaders who are able to communicate the information to larger audience. And then finally, we want to look at the regulatory and policy, both from a federal perspective, where the NRC is, where the NRC, uh, licensing and regulation is in the Part 50, 52, and 53, understand what that means for a potential developer within the state of Massachusetts, and then look at some of the policies and incentive structures that others have adapted, and then verify that we have all of the state agencies are ready to be able to play their role in being able to license something if a decision is made to license a nuclear reactor into the future. Again, the decision to develop the roadmap, the decision to have the working groups, the decision to invest in some of these conversations does not necessarily lead to a decision of placing a reactor in a particular location. I think that would be something that will organically develop. And it may not develop, and that's okay. I think this needs to happen if we were to have a public informed process. So, I think in terms of understanding where the foundations are, New England is no stranger to the economy of innovation. We pride ourselves in it. We have some of the best educational institutions, both for higher education, technical schools, and trade schools and high schools. We have some amazing state investments that are supported through continuous federal and state and private investments on R&D facilities that exist at MIT, at UMass Lowell. We have a research reactor, the one that you see on the right-hand side there. There's one at MIT. And we have other facilities and unique capabilities that we could immediately, and they are contributing, but we could potentially find ways to contribute that more, not only for the national needs, but for the regional needs, and then more specifically for the state of Massachusetts. So understanding that ecosystem, capturing that as a foundation into the roadmap will allow for potential developers, for community leaders, and for academic institutions and research developers and private sectors to know what is currently available and what might be possible to do with. The roadmap structure, the first one is the workforce pillar. I think there is really no argument that we have some of the best strengths in this area. We obviously have the Commonwealth Fusion as a potential first demonstration project on confinement fusion. Again, identifying those skill gaps, understanding that from a context of advanced reactors, fusion, and fuel cycle technologies, some of that high value supply chain contributions that might come from our pre-existing industrial defense industry that could probably mobilize and support. So I think there's a tremendous rich workforce development institution available in infrastructure and an opportunity to engage the workforce. New Englanders love to live in New England. People like myself who are not from New England love to be in New England. I think if there are jobs and career paths, then the New England is a region of choice for many, and we want to look at the ways to do that from a nuclear engineering context. The next one is technology. In fact, there's a lot of conversations around what technology, what should we build, right? Where we, and really, I think that's a little more premature. Honestly, the decision that, like in my household right now, we are deciding because my son's ready to get his driver's license. We can start to have a conversation about what kind of a car should he have, right? Do we need a car? How soon do we need a car? What would it look like? What is it going to cost? So these are kind of some of the important aspects that really need to go in to the assessment of the current development that is ongoing, whether it's fission or fusion technologies, right? What is the readiness level available right now? Where are they on the technology readiness level? Where are they on the deployment scale? Where is the robustness of the supply chain? And then what's the use case? There are, the gigawatt reactors like AP1000s that are ready to go now that may provide some reliable baseload power. But maybe some small modular reactors that are based on a light water proven PWR technology that might make sense for some of the immediate deployment. But then there are other technologies that are being demonstrated, such as sodium cooled or molten salt built-in storage solutions, such as Kairos and TerraPower, that can be more responsive to a coupled grid where there may be some intermittent energy demands, and you can offset through a systematic integrated storage systems. Um, and and then there's a whole gambit of microreactors that could potentially provide microgrid opportunities or solutions to you know large off-takers that essentially can reduce their own industrial or basically like combined gas type fossil exposure, reduce that down, and also provide more capacity on the grid. So lots of those things need to be sort of understood, and that's what we're going to try to do within the roadmap to sort of capture the current snapshot and then kind of move that forward. It is not the intention is not to decide which technology to pick. The intention is to understand what technologies are available and where they are right now. Um, the community engagement, I kind of talked about this. We want to look at some of the proven organizations, whether they're international, national, domestic, or local. We want to engage them. We want to develop a framework for public engagement. We want to identify and enter into some kinds of partnerships that allow us to understand exactly what the capacity is currently. We do not want to duplicate things. If there are communities and organizations that already have a voice, they're meeting on a regular basis, we want to leverage those. We are not looking to duplicate and add more, but actually to increase the value of what's existing and then fill the gaps as to what's not. So again, this exercise of roadmap is to sort of really get that. So we would really want everybody who's involved in any kind of energy slash planning or resiliency and grid. We want those folks, we want to talk to them and we want to hear from them. Then the last one is to do an assessment of where we are nationally. I mean, NRC is the gold standard. NRC is the one that sort of develops and is the one that is responsible for the civilian nuclear fleet in terms of licensing and regulating them. We are looking at some of the other things that are ongoing right now, whether it's the DOE's authorization and the DOD pathway for military sites. We want to capture what the current regulatory process is, where some of the changes are, and we also want to assess where, if any, gaps within our own state agencies, and which state agencies need to sort of be alerted and start to plan out as to what they may need to do for modernization. And then also look at the overall, cost benefit, public-private incentive structures that will essentially put the marker on becoming the sort of that state open to the conversations and opportunities for developers to look at Massachusetts more specifically, and then also New England more broadly. So basically, those are the contexts as to why. But I want to kind of also say why nuclear now. And actually, the Deep Commissioner of Connecticut, in her remarks, said nuclear technology is not a new topic, but nuclear technology opportunities in New England region is a new moment. And I really like that comment. I think the moment is now for us to understand and comprehensively assess why we should talk about nuclear. We need to acknowledge we have now 60 plus years of experience of operating 100 plus commercial reactor fleet and hundreds of other nuclear fuel cycle facilities if we are just sort of focused on the civilian side of the house. But the experience goes beyond just the civilian nuclear capacity within our national lab enterprises, our nuclear engineering institutions, and academic programs. There are about 40 of them all over the nation. and our operational experience of research reactors and research facilities with nuclear. Both MIT and UMass Lowell celebrated 50 years of safe operations of research reactors. So I think there's a lot of lessons learned. We need to present new pictures. These are the pictures that kind of get most attention of these, overcapacity wet storage, the Fukushima reactor with the compromised containment structure and the nuclear weapons. But I think that there are new images of continuous operations of reliable, 95% capacity factor reactors that we need to acknowledge. So the other thing that I'm hoping to do as we look at this thing more comprehensively, and as both at the federal and at state leaderships have recognized, historically, renewable and climate conscious communities thought that nuclear was something that was at conflict with them. Honestly, I think it's the exact opposite. As we have learned over the last 20, 30 years of renewable energy deployment, there's more data and data-based, experience-driven analysis that shows that nuclear can actually be a perfect complement for renewable and storage. And I think that that's something that's very important to understand as we start to plan the energy transition and truly approach that decarbonization goal that we have. And then in that same process, we need to acknowledge the maturation of the nuclear technology that has gone. So quickly sort of looking at the ISO New England's forecast report that they look at in terms of where the energy demand growth is going to be and what our capacity is. It's sort of, if you look at the left-hand graph there, it's very evident that the electrification, reshoring, and data centers are some of the demonstrated growth that will reshape the load forecasts, right? So one could argue, you're not going to put data centers out in New England. We love our land. Land is expensive, and we may not necessarily be an ideal location. And that was true. Obviously, a big penetration of data centers was out in Virginia, which was a very favorable location. But somebody sort of alerted me that, data centers of the future are going to be in support of the agentic AI, and as a transformation continues with the cloud-based computing, they become sort of the fundamental highways and airports for data as we consume it as a society, which means that you can't just have everything at one location. We only had a port of entry in Staten Island in New York, but we now have multiple ports. Not everybody's flying into JFK. We have additional regional airports. And as the traffic continues to increase, you not only have regional airports, but you have now distributed international airports. And that is kind of like the data centers. We may not have a hyperscaler coming into New England region anytime soon, but there's already medium scale deployment of data centers. And they're certainly putting up potential base load, even with some of the software optimization and other ways they could kind of do some load shedding to offset peak demands. There is going to be an overall increase in the base load demand based on the ISO New England's current assessment. And that is partly through the electrification of our heating, electrification of our transportation sector, and the projected growth from some new industries coming in and potential data centers as off-takers. And this is good news for nuclear. Nuclear probably was not as cost competitive when we were kind of transitioning to renewable plus cheap natural gas. And so the economics of some of the existing nuclear power plants looked like they were in a little bit of a question, maybe a decade ago or 2 decades ago. But that is transforming and changing as we are starting to see the loads coming onto the grid and the projected load growth in this regards. New England as large, and Massachusetts in particular, has done a fantastic job of really sort of reducing wasteful use of electricity on the grid, right? And you see that from 2005 to 2023, that the curve on the right-hand side, the purple curve. And that was, almost 27% of the gain came out of, basically efficiency improvements, right? So we've sort of squeezed that lemon as much as we can, and I think there's more that we could. So I don't think that we're going to stop doing that. But between all of the new growth demand that is looking there and our exhaustion of the easy efficiency improvements, you're starting to see the green curve there that sort of looks at potentially in the next, within the 10 years, will supersede our peak load on the grid. And so we need to kind of start to look at planning. Massachusetts has proposed almost doubling the capacity that's they're going to look into bringing onto the ISO New England grid. And so I think that's important for developers to start to think about. A lot of that new development is proposed within the wind and storage. And like I said, that's great. I have solar panels on my roof. I drive an EV, and I have battery storage in my garage. I am all for all of those things. However, I know that my production is starting to drop. I am still not off the grid. And when I'm consuming the electricity on the grid, and as I'm looking to build buy my second EV, I'm clearly an example of a unique household, which I'm sure half of you are, or maybe 90% of you are, can do the same math, right? So at that time, I am basically picking up natural gas generated electricity, which is basically 50% of the time. So again, I think as we continue to deploy renewable and storage, we still would need something else that helps us offset as we start to embrace for that demand. And so we need essentially firm, dispatchable, zero carbon power. And I think nuclear can fit in nicely if we can do it in a timely fashion, in a responsible, regulated way with community engagement and involvement. The governor kind of put up the energy affordability as one of her key aspects. Again, if you look at the overall land use case, nuclear provides an opportunity to produce affordable long-term, 60, 80, 100 years of projected sort of reliable and sort of a better assessed cost projections as a good mix within your dispatchable and non-dispatchable mix, and taking that carbon based off. So again, there may be costs that you would have to take on as an infrastructure at capital investments upfront, but it gives you a lot of cost reliability with a much lower uncertainty on overall cost of energy over 60 years. And that's something that's a very powerful attribute of nuclear because of a high energy density and very high capacity factor. And this takes off some of the pressure of having to build tremendous access capacity if you were to do that with just the renewables and storage, because the capacity factors of renewables are lower, which means you have to have more dispatchable capacity just in order to make up for the demand curves. So I think there's lots of reasons why we can start to look at these things together. And then lastly, I do want to sort of point out that for the New England region, I think it is more important for us to not only look at what the national trends are, which are very promising in terms of where everybody's looking at for nuclear, but also longitudinally in terms of our weather patterns, and also in terms of the way that our population thinks, our sort of that climate conscious, IQ leaning population. We are absolutely open to innovation, but we are also very, very intentional in where we are open to innovation. I live in a community where we still have oil heating because we don't want natural gas pipelines to come through the state forest. And we have septic tanks. So, as some of the oldest municipalities that are registered in the United States, in some places we still like that independence. And when we start to look at that kind of approach, you start to see where the New England mix should sort to look into the nuclear as an expanded portfolio. Because if you look at sort of Finland, Norway, Sweden, Netherlands, they all have a tremendously high hydro capacity. In the New England ISO grid, we are about 8%. By the way, that graph didn't show up there, so I apologize, but it's basically I have the same graph that shows the New England grid mix for 2025. So essentially about 12% renewable. But we need to increase that nuclear capacity, as you can see, evidenced in other country approaches that are sort of similarly placed. So I want to now sort of talk about why nuclear from a technology maturation point of view. Nuclear is one of those technologies that continues to find bipartisan support. Even in an extremely polarized political environments, people find both on the independents, the Republicans, and the Democrats at the federal and state, there is a common ground there because nuclear is a long-term deployable, dispatchable clean energy source that has seen, an extended investment through federal, state, and private investments on development of the technology itself. So I think that that's something very important to acknowledge. The reactors that we are benefiting from today were designed back in the 60s and built in the 70s and 80s, majority of them. And so, we were using slide rules and steam tables when we were designing those reactors. The reactors that we are designing today and going to build tomorrow, these reactors are going to take advantage of all of the technological innovation that has happened, including, advances in computational models, advances in sensing and automation and controls, and our ability and experience of operating these 60 years of operations of 100 reactors. So I just want to throw that up there that the technology has matured, even though we have not built a lot of new nuclear reactors in the last 30 years. A lot of good work was ongoing on regulations, on technology development, on realization of new types of fuel cycles and new types of reactors, new coolants, new fuels, and improvements in overall safety and security profiles. So overall, I think it is important to acknowledge that there's financial structures that are out there that also bring innovation. There's ways in which there are energy credits, and then there's the fundamental technology R&D and development. So the nuclear of today is actually much more robust. It gives you a whole range of choices, and which is why the technology pillar within the roadmap is so important. Because we're not looking at a choice between a boiling water reactor or a light water reactor. I mean, a pressurized water reactor. We are looking at 10 plus different developers, and 5+ utilities that have an operating fleet with the experience. And I think that robustness is important again. This is not the Model T, the black Model T Ford anymore. You're sort of making that decision based on what your use case need is. Are you looking at decarbonizing industrial loads? Maybe there are vendors like X Energy who are demonstrating that kind of deployment in Texas could be interesting. Are we looking for some form of a sort of a tightly coupled renewable solution where we can offset the demands? TerraPower is looking at that demonstration in Wyoming. So I think it's also important to sort of recognize that there are more choices within the nuclear technology availability, and then the micro reactors, which I'm really personally more bullish on, could have some range of options that could be very interesting as well. But so there is something that is available today. There's also something available as we move forward, and I think that that's really important from a nuclear technology point of view. And that also sort of fits a range of price point. So the dollar per kilowatt may be a little higher as you scale down, maybe till those reactors are starting to modularize and start producing the nth of the kind. But even if you sort of keep debating that, the bottom line is that the capital cost investments are lower when you go to a smaller size reactor, and that opens more developer choices in terms of who and what they're finding those solutions for. And I myself was one of many nuclear engineers who has a paper reactor that they have all worked on. But it is really interesting today. These are not paper reactors. These are actual reactors that are in some stage of pre-licensing or licensing or and deployment stage. There are actual shovels in the ground with demonstration reactors being planned and done, underway. And so, I think one could argue that there's 2,000 paper reactors, but there's more than 10 real reactors that are being in some form of developmental stage, both in SMR and AMR. We are also looking to do some additional sessions where we actually start to talk about the technology itself, explain that a little bit more, and engage. And I already talked about the microreactors. Those open a whole new range of possibilities in terms of use cases. Again, they may be a little more on the early stages of development, but they would essentially benefit from all of the work that's ongoing right now with the SMRs. And the deployment of the SMRs is going to benefit from the next slide that I show in terms of the experience that we're gaining from the building of the AP1000s, basically the Generation 3 plus reactors. I think there's going to be several more after the Vogtle. And this really exciting thing that's ongoing in terms of the restarting projects. And these are really interesting to kind of start to look at because there's a lot of experience here, not only from the technology itself, workforce, but also in terms of economic models, right? There's a lot that is coming through in understanding how you might actually characterize the cost, how you may take advantage of the DOE loan guarantees. And I think these are all on a much shorter time horizon, which means there's a lot of learning that will happen in the next year and a couple of years, and that's very important. So all of these things put together essentially leads to one of the slides that I really love talking about, which is that nuclear is mature and ready to offer opportunities. And it is not the thing of the past, but it's the experience of the past, the opportunities of the present, and the solutions of the future. And I think if you put these four things that I talked about with the experience, we are the world leader on the operating fleet. I think our utilities have done an amazing job of running these reactors at very efficiently. We are some of the best on the OE operations and management maintenance. We have the world-class leaders in our outage management. And that's very important because that's a very skilled labor that then can also support some of the new reactor build, particularly on the safety and operations and building that in to the culture of the next generation fleet, and then the restart and the SMRs. So I think there's a lot of experience that has happened in the last 40 years, a lot of new experience that is ongoing right now, and all of those point towards an opportunity that we can look at. And we are not the only ones realizing this. There's obviously the first mover states, there's about 11 of those. There's lots of states that are doing all kinds of different dialogues. There's basically about 40 states. I would argue that number could be like 44 now, because there's literally a new announcement where there is some form of legislature at the state level to explore nuclear technology. And, states that you would never think about, like West Virginia, Wyoming, Utah, Hawaii, all of them are looking at nuclear technology because it is really that robustness of opportunity exists today that wasn't there 60 years ago when there was basically a 600, 800, or 1,000 megawatt light water reactor. So I think the universities are playing an important role here in getting that larger message out. And I think the communities are becoming very, very engaged and interested in learning what's going on. So I think it's important to look at, where everything is in terms of optimization and operations, carbon-free energy value. How do we really, how are we going to achieve that? If you genuinely want to just take the electrical load that's at 51% down to carbon neutral or carbon zero, how do you do that? If you now look broadly into the entire energy consumption, that number is even more glaring. It's nationally, we're about 81% of our total energy consumption. This includes industrial, commercial, and other loads outside of just electrical load. We're at about 81% is still fossil based. So I think it's important, again, if we want to be serious about this, how do we do this? And looking at the innovation in the supply chain and workforce. So I think there's a lot that's riding among many states, and Massachusetts, I'm glad, is also joining that club. Um, some states have been very aggressive in putting up quite a bit of funding to attract new businesses, the gigafactories in Texas to demonstration and utilization of the clean deliver sites that was available in Tennessee, where, more than 8 different demonstration projects are underway, to Idaho National Lab, where many of the dome projects or the advanced reactor demonstration projects are ongoing. I think it's important that we bring that information to our population, to our community, so that people know that nuclear is not stagnant, and the only thing that's happening in nuclear is not the decommissioning of the Mark I BWR that operated safely and reliably for close to 30 years at Plymouth, Massachusetts. There's other things that are going on. So, in summary, again, the Massachusetts roadmap, we're looking at the alignments, we're investigating all of the different, wealth of information that's out there, how to leverage that so we can leapfrog forward. We can catch up to the other states very quickly here because we absolutely have all the infrastructure in place. We now have an intentional governor. I think the legislature is out there looking at potentially voting on removing the moratorium, which is a very, very important step. I feel personally, as a voting taxpayer of the Massachusetts, just because you remove a moratorium does not mean you can build a nuclear power plant. There is a very involved licensing and regulation process through the NRC that really will take a comprehensive public review and the industry, finance, and community readiness before which you can start to build a reactor. So I feel that there is absolutely no harm in removing the moratorium. By removing the moratorium, we are allowing for a dialogue to continue. We're allowing our population to participate in this broad economy of clean nuclear energy that is not only being deployed within the United States, but also internationally. I think the US needs to be at that table on a global scale. If you're not at the table, you cannot drive the decisions on safety standards. You can't drive the decisions on added security requirements. And so I think that it is important for Massachusetts as one of the lead innovative state to be at that table. And it is very important to get that moratorium removed so that people can take us seriously and we get the seat at the table. But anyway, there's a lot that is going on that we need to investigate and capture within the roadmap, as I discussed. Just putting up the stakeholder groups up again, just to sort of highlight the importance of all of the groups, that we want your partnership and your help in making sure that folks are aware and alert. This is just the beginning of the engagement process. The roadmap is just the starting point of moving things forward. And maybe, I mean, this is a transparent, public informed decision-making process. So the roadmap might point to the fact that we don't need to pursue. Maybe we have all of the capabilities within the state of Massachusetts that we would do everything but building a nuclear power plant. And that's okay if that's where we decide. But we still will be able to engage with our neighbors within the United States and then also internationally. So again, I want to put up the schedule. We just had our first meeting yesterday on the stakeholder group, 2 hour long. We had a very robust participation from our community leaders and equity and environmental justice and environmental organizations. As the word gets around, I think we suspect that there's going to be even heightened interest in participation. But we're very happy. In fact, when I talk to my colleagues in Texas, Tennessee, and elsewhere, they're sort of surprised as to, in a very short period of time, how much engagement we've gotten. And I want to acknowledge our state leadership, our governor's leadership, and my team at UMass Lowell, and all of you who are tuned in helping getting that word out very quickly. I think this is a testament of how quickly Massachusetts can do things. Some of these states had had a task force and working groups and other things for years, but we may, if I'm successful, after a lack of sleep and missed vacation opportunities, we would have a roadmap that gives us a template to keep moving the dialogue forward. And most importantly, a group of engaged organizations and individuals that will be so important to go beyond the roadmap document itself. So with that, I will stop. Um, like I said, this was our fourth meeting. We essentially did the exact same informational session, not exact same. I'm trying as a professor, it's always hard to give the same lecture over and over because then you become boring. But I try to capture the essence of where we want to go. We have all of the instruments for engagement. You can register for the stakeholder meetings. You can get more updates and information on nuclear roadmap. Please provide us information that you want to share with us that should go into the roadmap by email, nuclear roadmap at uml.edu, or through the feedback form. We are trying to make ourselves available as much as we can. We'd like your support and help. And if you have some ideas about how we might be able to do things well, we would like to do that too. And I'm going to give a shout out to ChatGPT for producing a cartoon that modernizes my old cartoon that I use on Lord Give Me Coffee to change the things I can and wine to accept the things I can't. I think there is an opportunity on Lord Give Me Generation 3 Plus to meet the gigawatts demand I need now and the AMRs, the advanced modular reactors, for everything else into the future. I think we are doing good here. I respect your time. I thank you again for joining